All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the seventh installment of our Acadiana Business Resource Webinar Series. My name is Andre Bro, and I work on the team at One Acadiana. Our Acadiana Business Resource Webinars are brought to you by business resource partners from across the Acadiana region, including One Acadiana, LIDA, Opportunity Machine, the Downtown Development Authority, the Louisiana Small Business Development Center at UL Lafayette, Acadiana Workforce Solutions, the United Way of Acadiana, and other local chambers and economic development offices from across the Acadiana region. We have come together to support Acadiana's business community, particularly our small businesses, in response to COVID-19 by hosting a series of webinars on timely and relevant topics. Today's webinar focuses on Louisiana's tourism economy post-COVID-19. After the presentation, we will use the remaining time for Q&A. As you have questions for our panelists, please enter them into the Q&A box and select all panelists from the Ask menu. We will be recording the questions as we go. If we do not have time to get to your question during today's webinar, we will try to follow up with you as soon as possible afterwards. I will now turn it over to Ben Berthelot, President and CEO of the Lafayette Convention and Visitors Commission, Chairman of the Louisiana Travel Association, and a Lieutenant Governor appointee to the Louisiana Tourism Development Commission. And Ben will kick off our presentation and introduce our other distinguished guests. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre and Troy and One Acadiana for recognizing the importance of the tourism industry to our region and to our state. And thank you for all that you guys, along with your partners, are doing to get out great resources to all of us during this tough time. I'm very excited about the panel we have in place, and I just want to briefly do an introduction of them, starting with Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. He has led the state of Louisiana to 3 straight years of record-breaking tourism numbers. He's no stranger to crisis management, having been on the front lines in Plaquemine Parish for both Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill, fighting for the people of Louisiana. Lieutenant Governor, we feel fortunate to have you in this position at this time, leading our state and our industry, and we thank you for joining us.
Thank you, appreciate it, man.
Randy Daniel is the owner-operator of La Pizzeria in Lafayette, which opened February 20th in the face of the COVID crisis. His 20-year restaurant career includes most recently 4 years with Double R Restaurant Group, which includes Vermicelli, Pour, and Another Broken Egg. And prior to that, he spent 16 years with Bloomin' Brands, parent company of Outback Steakhouse. In his volunteer leadership role, he currently serves as the Louisiana Restaurant Association Acadiana Chapter President. Thank you, Randy, for joining us. Jimmy Saxton is the longstanding general manager of the Doubletree by Hilton. As the largest property in the parish, the Doubletree serves as a great barometer of the pulse of the hotel and motel community in our area. Jimmy also serves as the One Acadiana appointee to the Lafayette Convention and Visitors Commission Board. Thank you, Jimmy, as well, for being with us. I wanted to start off with just an overview and a few slides that we'll put on the screen of the state of the industry, both in our area and the state. So, Andre, if you can see those slides. Here in Lafayette Parish, March historically has been our highest year in terms of room revenue for our hotels. Obviously, you can see, started off the month of March, room revenue up 6.4%, went into the second week of March, and you can start to see the numbers begin to decline. Hotel occupancy dropped 19.8%, room revenue dropped. And then that third week of March, when really, I think almost overnight, the industry began to get crippled. Occupancy dropped 49.1%, room revenue dropped 59.9%. And then the last week of March, 58.2% drop in occupancy and 69.4% drop in room revenue. Moving to April, when the stay-at-home order was in full effect. Andre, if you can go to the next slide. Hotel occupancy week of March 29th through April 4th, down 61.2%. Room revenue down 73.7%. And then the last week that we have on record, we'll get more numbers tomorrow, but sort of sees it flattening out at 23.5% occupancy, which was down 64.4%. Room revenue down 77.2%. I expect these numbers will remain around the same, if not continue to drop even more as we move forward. Next slide, please. Here in Lafayette Parish, in the meetings, sports, and convention business, these numbers do not include leisure or corporate numbers or concerts at the Cajun Dome. We've lost 25,567 room nights that we have record of, with an economic impact loss of 43,473,990. So you can see it's a tough time, obviously, for our industry. Next slide, please. On the national level, these are stats from the U.S. Travel Association. They're estimating a loss of 5.9 million jobs by the end of April. The loss in travel-related jobs alone will more than double the U.S. unemployment rate from 3.5 to 7.1 by the end of April. The expected loss of $910 billion in travel-related economic output in 2020 would be 7 times the impact of 9/11. Seven times the impact of 9/11. And the predicted slowdown in the travel sector alone will push the U.S. economy into a protracted recession, just the travel industry. Next slide, please. In terms of our restaurant industry, statistics from the National Restaurant Association, 8 million restaurant employees have already been laid off or furloughed. This represents 2 out of every 3 restaurant jobs. The restaurant food service industry lost $30 billion in revenue in March and is on track to lose an additional $50 billion by the end of this month. 4 in 10 restaurants have closed their doors, some with no hope of reopening. Over 60% of restaurant owners say that existing federal relief programs, including the CARES Act, will not enable them to keep their employees on payroll throughout the downturn. And then, assuming a gradual reopening of the economy in June 2020, forecasts sustain losses of $240 billion for restaurants by the end of the year. Thank you, Andre. I think that's our last slide. I wanted to start with the Lieutenant Governor. And Lieutenant Governor, I know you've been in close contact with the governor's office as well as fellow lieutenant governors across the country. Just recently, you were named to the governor's resiliency task force. Can you tell us what you are seeing across the state and what sort of conversations you're having in regard to when the state might be able to open up and what that might possibly look like?
Right. Thank you, Ben, and thank y'all for being here. Yesterday, we had the conference call with the vice president, and we discussed these phases that the president has put the criteria out there. I'm still hopeful that by sometime next week, we can give the governor some criteria that we can get certain regions of the state open May 1st. The mayor of New Orleans has already extended the stay at home to May 15th. Obviously, her area has the highest impact. I don't know, based on what we're able to see the numbers do next week, whether the governor will stay in line with that. The main criteria for that phase 1 is a 14-day average, not 14 days of decline or level, but that average of 14 days with no increase, and we've achieved that. Now, this commission by the governor, which has people from every segment of business community, restaurants, hotels, is going to weigh in on what that soft opening looks like. First, we've got to make sure it works for the businesses. It doesn't make sense to open a third of a restaurant. Can they make it on half the seating? Those are the things that will be discussed. Our first meeting is Wednesday. And then what do we do to make the public feel comfortable in getting out? Does the servers wear masks? Do they check their temperature every morning? So all those things will be discussed and the recommendations will be made to the governor. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we can put together enough recommendations next week and hopefully get, if not the rest of the state, some of the regions open in the beginning of May. But we've got to make sure it makes sense for the businesses and the public has that comfort level of getting out and shopping and eating in the restaurants.
Thank you. I know we'll come back to you here after we hear from our other panelists. Randy, let's go to you. Yeah, your story has been documented having to face COVID-19 just 3 or so weeks after purchasing La Pizzeria. Also, in your capacity as president of the Acadiana chapter of the Restaurant Association, you're in contact with many other restaurant owners. As I understand it, you have been able to secure some of the federal assistance being offered. Can you just tell us a little bit about your story and what the last few weeks have looked like?
Yeah, my pleasure, Ben. Thank you for having me. So, purchased the pizzeria and reopened on February the 17th. And we opened like any other restaurant would after a remodel. About 3 weeks in, we started to feel the effects of COVID-19. On the fourth week, of course, as everybody knows, we had to shut down to maintain safety. Immediately, we had to lay off 2/3 of our staff, which is about people. But we have been able to stay open through curbside takeaway and delivery services. We have received PPP, the payroll program. But the questions we have now is we don't know if we're going to be able how to use it properly in terms of we can't reopen the restaurant yet. It's not safe to bring our employees back in the building. So we're going to time deadline. And if we do open at 25% or 50%, the governor allows us to do, which is safe and we're happy to do, we just don't know how to proceed. We've seen across the board about a 43% decrease in sales at this restaurant. And from what I've talked to other restaurants, we're lucky. We're doing very well. Some restaurants they can't maintain, they can't stay open right now. Last night, we for the Louisiana Restaurant Association, we did a drive-through crawfish boil for our annual meeting. Ben, thank you for grabbing some crawfish. And I was talking to Frank Randall, and they're used to having buses of 50, 70 people dropped off on a regular basis at this time of the year. And they're just not seeing that, and they don't know if they're ever going to see it again with the way people are and the way people worry when they go into public places. So we're looking forward to getting opened up again, Ben. We just don't know what to expect and how to do it yet.
Right. Thank you, Randy. We'll come back to you as well. And Jimmy, given the size of your property, you were one of the first, if not the first property to have to make cuts to your staffing immediately. I know you're wearing many hats at the hotel with so few staff left on board. Can you tell us a little bit about the story at the DoubleTree and what you see as a short-term new normal for your hotel once we're given the opportunity to open and travel back up?
All right. Thanks, Ben. Since the second week of March, about March the 16th, we have had to cut our staff. This, as you said earlier, March and April are typically the busiest seasons for the hotel business in our town. And we had our staffing at about 130 mid-March, and today we have 12. So we are still open. We do have enough occupancy for our owners to say, we'll keep you open. Although our owners have about 60 hotels, they have closed 18 of them. So we feel Frank's pain at Randall's because most of those buses came through and stayed at the hotels in town. So we understand that. We do have the new norm is no food service. We couldn't sustain food service within the building at the occupancy levels we have. We are, we're running about the same number of rooms sold as most hotels in town, but because we have so many, our occupancy is much lower than the average. So on average, the properties are selling between 20 and 30 rooms a night, it looks like, in town. And we're sustaining that average. So that does keep us open. But as a full service hotel, the benefits that we provide during normal times, a bar to go to, food service within the building, meeting rooms for large groups, those things are no longer helpful, and it's better. The guests are staying at places where the rooms are larger. They're still offering some type of version of the brand required breakfast that they normally have, which I just don't have the facilities to offer something like that. So some of that is disappointment for us. But right now, we plan to stay open. If we can keep that 20 to 30 a night, our owners are satisfied with that. And hopefully, sometime around that May the 1st date, we get some at least in-state transient travel to help start to boost us.
Thank you, Jimmy. That's a good segue into our next question for the Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor, the research has shown that once travel is opened up, obviously people aren't going to be hopping on a plane to travel across the country or the world. We're going to have to rely on regional travel, drive, traffic, market, and you've been a long proponent of the staycation concept for the state of Louisiana. Can you talk to us a little about what your plans are from a statewide marketing and what that will look like early on as travel opens up?
Right. The first thing we did, we have a law that says I cannot spend more than 10% of the tourism budget in state. So we got the legislature to remove that so we can take whatever monies we need and promote right here in Louisiana. We filmed some shots the other day that we're putting some public service announcements out to ask people to go out and pick up food at your local restaurant to help those that are open survive. The second phase of that, once we get open, is asking people to staycation, go out and stay at a hotel, bed and breakfast, shop, eat, to support Louisiana, and something we've done good in the past in supporting our neighboring parishes and state and cities around the state. And then the third phase of that will be the drive market. So promoting any and all events we have all over Louisiana to make sure in that drive market where you might not normally promote something outside of your region, we're going to put money behind it to make sure they come in, fill the hotels, and get more people from that drive market. And you're absolutely right, Ben. That's what the research is saying. Each week we're looking at that data and knowing that it makes no sense to try to get people to come in from Chicago out the back. We're going to have to branch out from Louisiana. We're going to be highlighting all the great things here in Louisiana. And if we're able to get the rest of the state open before New Orleans, we're going to really heavily market New Orleans people or people in that region that the restaurants in Lafayette is back open to pull some of those staycation people to your region. But that's going to, this past week, we got over 400,000 in grants for the arts community. Those grants, we hope to get out in the next couple of weeks to help the arts community have that money to promote their events as we get back online. We're working on some grants for the main streets and different areas to help every area of the state have some promotional money, knowing the hotel motel numbers are not giving you the budget you need. We're going to have to make up that difference on a state, and we're on the state level, and we're willing to do that.
Thank you, sir. I know you mentioned New Orleans and some of the conversation coming out of New Orleans about not opening up until 2021. One of the effects of that is we have started to have folks reach out to us in terms of scheduling meetings that they were anticipating happening in New Orleans. Another factor that will play well for our area once we're given the opportunity to open back up is we have the great investment made by the folks in Broussard and Youngsville with their sports complexes. And the second that those teams are allowed to travel and start playing ball again in the summertime, that should be a small shot in the arm for our industry, which would help immediately. And then in the fall, we've been fortunate to have several events not cancel and postpone to the fall. And we're seeing the possibility of having a pretty good fall if this thing opens back up in the next month or so. Jimmy, what are you seeing? Are you able to forecast the fall, and are you seeing some of that as well at your property?
Okay, so I mean, we have started seeing a nice rebooking, like for August and beyond. It has surprised me that some of the late June, July meetings are postponing, but they seem to be postponing because they're worried about their attendees financially and not worried about could they or could they not have their meeting they're only worried about the burden that it might put on the attendees. So we have a better backlog for August than we've ever had. Just, hope that continues. Those are meetings that have rebooked from here, from the spring. We have received a few calls about these New Orleans. We had our meeting scheduled in New Orleans, and we'd rather have it somewhere else. So we have received a few of those calls. We haven't booked anything on that yet because, as our sales team is furloughed, we're seeing if we could get some catering people back in to make sure they do the space requirements right.
Right. That's good. Good to hear that. We're starting to get a couple of questions. I'm going to start with a question. Let's see, Lieutenant Governor, if you're hearing, is the governor willing to open the state outside of New Orleans?
I'm sorry, say that again, Ben?
The question from someone on the webinar was, what are you hearing in terms of the governor's willingness to open the state outside of New Orleans?
Well, I had the conversation with him yesterday. He's not ready to make the commitment but he didn't rule out that May 1st date, which is a good thing. We have our first meeting Wednesday, and as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, we hope to have some recommendations to him early next week. And if those numbers continue on the trend they're going, I'm still optimistic we can get open in other areas of the state on the 1st. I had conversations this morning. I know in July, Lauren Daigle has a concert in New Orleans and one in Lafayette. And we have we work with her as a promoter of tourism, and we've reached out to say, look, if you're going to cancel New Orleans, don't cancel Lafayette yet, because we may get to that third phase a lot quicker and still be able to have that show in July. I'm cautiously optimistic that Lafayette, your region, will do a lot better out the box than the New Orleans region will. So what I hope to be able to do is early next week is, because we're going to have to give the businesses and restaurants, at least 10 days to know that we're going to pull the trigger and open and make a soft opening so they can, get their staff back and everything. But I think we'll have a good indication on Monday of next week whether that goal can be made or not.
Thank you, sir. Another question, I think we just touched on it a little bit. I'm not sure if there's much to add, but the question was, after travel is open, what is the estimate of time frame for convention, trade shows, events to gear up? And Jimmy spoke a little bit to that in terms of the August time frame, which is encouraging. I know the Cajun Dome has secured the permission from the bond commission for a loan, a $950,000 loan, to allow them to be able to open up and ramp up immediately as we're able to. And so that is encouraging as well, Jim. Robbie Bush, question, is it legal in Louisiana to only offer prepaid clients credit for future travel rather than offer a refund or a credit? I'm not sure we have anybody who knows the answer to that, Robbie, but we can try to get that for you. Does anybody know the answer to that question?
And I can tell you this, when we had to cancel the state parks, what we did is, if you take a credit, we're giving you an extra 2 nights, one on each end of your stay at the cabin, as opposed to taking a cash back. So we gave them a little incentive to take that credit instead of taking a refund. And I think we got an opinion on that. It was legal. I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't give you legal advice on the question, but that's what we're doing to try to keep them on the books to come into Louisiana.
Right. Thank you. I want to encourage everybody, please send your questions to the Q&A portal. In the meantime, Randy, one of the discussions we're having here is in regard to our Eat Lafayette campaign that supports locally owned restaurants. And it's hard to plan for that when we don't know what that looks like. Will a restaurant be at 50% capacity? Are they going to be still doing to go and all of those things? What are you what scenarios are you looking at? And I would think it's more profitable, obviously, to get people in your restaurant and drinking adult beverages and spending money. But at the same time, you may have to continue some sort of to go capacity. What are you looking at in those regards?
I think we're definitely going to see a shift for a long term on the amount of takeaway food we sell. Historically, if you were doing 15%, that was high. I estimate moving forward, we're going to see about a 45-50% for a while. And we need to throw some thank yous out to our to ATC. They allowed us to all start selling bottled wine and bottled beer to go. So, for example, last week we were able to do a virtual wine dinner. We teamed up with a vendor, and they actually had a 45-minute seminar while everybody ate dinner. So I think you're going to see some things coming out like that. I don't think we're going to, if we open the doors tomorrow, I think we would get a rush and all of a sudden everybody would kind of back off a little bit again. So we're going to have to be inventive and figure out ways to take care of our customers, both at home and in the restaurant, to make up for that void of restaurant dining.
Thank you. We're starting to have some more questions come in, so thank you to those who. A question from Allison. What are some of the tactics you are considering to raise the public's comfort levels upon reopening? That's for all panelists. I'll just start from what I know, and the Cajun Dome is ramping up in that capacity for sure. In terms of sanitization, I know our hotels are going to be doing the same thing. Our restaurants are doing the same thing. Lieutenant Governor, you touched a little bit about the importance of that as we open up. Do you have any other insight to add?
I've, what I did in my office, I reached out to every group that I could touch. Like, I spoke at an LNG conference in Houston, and I reached out to that group to try to get them to book a conference later this year, early next year in Lafayette. Because I've reached out to every group I've gone all over and spoke to try to get them interested in booking their next event here. And I think that customer service of any and all groups, large and small, that we can reach out to and let them know we're going to be open for business, and whatever we got to do to accommodate them may give us a leg up on them just deciding where they might go. So I think that public reaching out, both from your team and our tourism team, reaching out to those groups. We've also reached out to a lot of the national bike racing people, which is a group that wants to get back out there. I know we talked to a group out of Natchez, Mississippi. Their giveaway is going to be a mask for their bike race there, and we're encouraging them to try to come do one in Louisiana. So any of those groups that we can give any incentive to come and stay in Louisiana, we're trying to really be leaning forward and doing that.
Yeah, we have had Cycle Zydeco rescheduled to the fall. Great bike ride festival on wheels. That'll be great for our area. Jimmy or Randy, in terms of safety of your customers moving forward, what does that look like differently? I know y'all are already doing some of that.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, just, Hilton as a brand has been, very informative of what they want to do, and regardless of your staffing levels, that you have to, sanitize these high touch points, door handles, elevator buttons, telephones, any, remote controls, anything that is being touched is where we sanitize with the chemicals provided by our third-party vendor. So, I mean, we're doing that still routinely, and we're doing it, 3 times a day in the public areas, and then we're making sure the guests, the rooms that we are selling, are being taken care of the same way each night.
Very good. Randy, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think Jimmy's industry and the restaurant industry are both really fully prepared for this. The difference is we're going to be bringing a lot of things we do behind the doors of the customer to the forefront, meaning, for now, we're going to have sanitation stations set up in the restaurant for customers. You're going to see employees wearing masks, salt and pepper shakers coming off the table so that we can sanitize them in between each use. But we've been training for this. This is normal for us. I think the biggest change is going to be the customer's going to actually see what we're doing. The other thing that's very important is training on our hourly level. We've always been very strict and strong on our training for the management level. But now you'll see, like, for example, the Louisiana Restaurant Association offering free courses to anybody that wants to take COVID-19 training as far as what safety is. And I think education for our level is going to be very key and important.
Thank you. Another question from Ann for the Lieutenant Governor. Have you heard anything about casinos reopening with limited capacity? Is that something y'all going to be working on?
One of the committees on this board is represented by the casinos, and some of the comments that have coming back to me have been trying to get them in this phase one by limiting every fourth machine, and instead of 7 people at a blackjack table, 5. I don't know if that's going to make the cut or not, but that is being discussed because I know they are anxious to get back online, and the state's anxious because of the tax revenue they provide. So that is one of the top subjects for this commission, and I'm sure there will be a recommendation back to the governor whether we can get to that comfort level to get them in this first phase or not. I'm not sure.
Right. Another question for you, Lieutenant Governor, from Janet. What are your thoughts about the potential fall wave / surge of COVID-19?
The third wave?
About the potential fall wave or surge again in the fall.
Yeah. They say we can expect another, the professional health people are saying that. I think, and whoever mentioned the training was an excellent idea, because I think everybody's well aware of the distancing and the mask and washing your hands. I think it's going to be really up to us when we get back open to make sure everybody's changed their way of greeting people. And I think it's going to, in my discussions with the national health people, it's really going to be up to how well we react to keeping our distance and operating differently, whether we see that wave come back or not. But they have warned of that potential, but there's no, it's only a thought that they expect it. How bad it will be, we don't know.
Right. And Diane had sort of a question along those same lines. She wanted to know, will social distance guidelines be observed during concerts and other large gatherings? And if so, how are they going to manage that from an audience compliance? And I'll just answer that from my conversations with the occasion owners. They know that's going to be part of the new normal. And I think every venue in the country is going to be going through the same thing. And I don't think anybody knows exactly what that looks like right now, but certainly everyone knows that it will look different than it did prior to COVID-19. Question. Another question for Lieutenant Governor, very popular this morning. Are there any plans to pull attractions to get a feeling for when they will open and how they plan to change operations or market to accommodate a tentative public? Can the state make recommendations to attractions in this regard?
Yeah. Well, we've been reaching out to the ones that we know, and we've reached out to our regional partners like you. Anything that, we were telling people, don't cancel anything that's not going to cost you money to cancel it. Wait to the last minute, because if we keep this thing heading south, we'll be able to get to that third phase, which is large crowds, a lot quicker than a lot of other states if we do it right. And so one of the things, Ben, that we've discussed and we're ready to do is that regional tourism promoting of all the great things in your region, both in-state for staycation, and then any events, once this thing if we know these events are going to take place, we're going to put additional money behind them, knowing how important it is that the restaurant shops, hotels, bed and breakfasts, that we got to do a little better at getting them back full quickly, because that could be the difference in some of these businesses making it or not. So as we see those, and I've been asked to call and talk to some of the conference people and reassure them that they don't need to cancel in July and August, just like the Lauren Davo event. So any assistance that I can give for any of those events, I'm willing to do that.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up directly as it relates to the attractions. We operate a visitor enterprise grant program every year, and we're about to roll that out. And one of the situations we're looking at is in the past, the funding could not be used for operations. It could only be used for marketing our infrastructure. And we're considering opening that up for 1 year to allow for operation expenses, because we know that once attractions are able to open, that it's going to be tough, like it will for any business to be able to even turn the lights on and bring staff back. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to be able to roll out as part of our visitor enterprise funding. Let's see, the question. Yes.
And then knowing that the marketing funds are going to be limited for everybody, because as we put these staycations together regionally, we want to make sure we're working with you to include all of those attractions to help promote them in our promotional dollars that we're spending, knowing that they're going to have limited resources. So make sure we cover all aspects of that when we're putting these staycations together.
Thank you. Another question from Robbie. Let's see, can the state offer a prepaid voucher that would include lodging, sightseeing, and food? The state travel agency could handle the payment of the admissions to participating businesses. If overwhelming, you could use local agencies to assist state travel agency.
I don't think the state can, but the CVBs can. And so if that's something that works for your region, we can support it with some type of grant. But I think it's got to be done by a regional CVB, because the state law limits us on some of the things we can do. But if you put a grant program together for your region like that with a package, we can either help fund it or we can help promote it all over the South. So that's a great idea, and it's something that will lure people in. And we're even, when we're reaching out outside of Louisiana, we're going to offer some incentives to come stay at the state parks. When people are looking at which state am I going to go to, we're going to really push some incentives out for the state parks to get them to come to Louisiana.
Absolutely. And the scenario Robbie referenced is one that generally happens often with international travel, where they come with a prepaid voucher and not having to have their form of currency. That's generally operated by a third party operator, but it's a great idea, and something that we'll certainly look at as well as we move forward. And trying to see if there's any other questions here. Andre, are you seeing any questions that I'm not able to open up?
Yes, so there's some other questions coming through in the Q&A box, which you might need to look for. If you click the ... icon, you should be able to find the menu for that. But I'll throw one out there from Dana about the outlook for larger gatherings like concerts. What does the outlook look like for larger gatherings like concerts?
I don't think anybody knows right now. Lieutenant Governor, you may have the most insight on that, but I think we're all just sort of waiting to see what that.
Yeah. I looked at the requirements. Obviously, the concerts are in the phase 3 rollout. I believe, and I'm always leaning forward on this, and I got in a little trouble for telling the mayor she moved too quickly to cancel St. Patrick's Day, and had egg on my face because she was right and I was wrong. But when I talked about the Lauren Daigle in July, I think that's doable. And I think, you need a month or two to promote those events. So, I'm optimistic that we can keep that event and start seeing events planned, July, August, September. They got to be comfortable. They can sell the tickets, and people have to be comfortable going into those large arenas. It's going to be interesting to see what college and the NFL does and I think that will give us, if they announce they're going back full force, that will help open it up a lot quicker. And if they feel comfortable, those people are going to go to the games. People obviously will be comfortable going to concerts and large events. So I think it's unknown, but I think as quickly as we get open and we don't see the numbers escalate, then people will get comfortable going to those large events. But I'm optimistic that the July Lauren-Daigle thing will stay on track.
Thank you. And we'll give you a break, and maybe Randy or Jimmy, a question from Maggie. What do you think let's see. Do you see benefits packages and plans changing for hourly workers in your segment?
And I don't know of anything right now that's going to change on that. That's honestly just far beyond where we are at the moment.
You mean,
I would say the same thing. I think we'll start calling back, room attendants first, and then you really won't see a package from ownership. I just think there might be some different government aids to subsidize reduced hours even after they start back.
Thank you, guys. We had another question about crawfish season and any impact on that. I have not heard of anything. I don't know if any of our other panelists have. We had some good crawfish last night from Randall's, though. I'll put in a plug for Randall's on that. Okay, question earlier from Rob. Are any of you seeking refinancing of existing debt through the new available debt credit facilities with lower rates available? I know, Jimmy, your ownership handles a lot of that, and Randy, you're relatively new, and is there any insight on that, maybe from what y'all are hearing from others in the industry? Randy? No?
No, I'm sorry, but no, I haven't been hearing much through that.
Okay. Question from Ricky. Is state and local government going to waive property tax for hotels? My understanding, the governor has pushed back a state sales tax for collection for 2 months, ending April 30th. Locally, that decision is made by the sales tax collector. And I was told this week that they are moving forward with March collections. A question from Sam. Are there any other restrictions that have been discussed on reopening other than a limitation on building occupancy? Has anybody heard anything other than that, Lieutenant Governor or Randy, with the restaurants?
Yeah, there's a list of things in the president's recommendations for phase one. Recommending older people and people with pre-existing conditions continue to shelter in place, keeping the distance, no larger than 10 people in one group. Non-essential travel is not going to be permitted, and coming up with the criteria for making the workers safe in the workplace. Whether it's check-in temperature, I talked about it earlier. So all of those things are in phase one, and then it gets a little bit more open. For instance, bars are not allowed to open in phase one, but are in phase two, with standing room only. So those criteria change as you get into the different phases.
Thank you. A question from Anita. She's hearing lots of feedback from restaurant, bar, and cafe owners who are concerned that the federal government is essentially competing with small business owners because they can make more money on unemployment than they can actually going to work. Lieutenant Governor, can you weigh in if you're hearing the same?
Absolutely. We early on with our congressmen, and I think that's what happens when you send people to Washington that haven't worked or owned a business. They equivalent to making about $21 an hour unemployment and the stimulus money. How are you going to get people to go back to work? That's going to be a tough challenge when they could stay home and make $21 an hour, as opposed. And we said that from day one, that whatever that package is, it should mirror as you go back to work, because it's going to be tough to get some of those people to go back to work till that money runs out.
Thank you. A question from Danielle. Spring festivals were able to reschedule for the late summer fall because their funding had been secured before the stay-at-home order. What advice do you have for fall festivals who would be gathering funds and sponsorships now but cannot due to the economic shutdown? We've seen several fall festivals say we'll see you in 2021. I'll start with that one, Danielle. We have seen several of our spring festivals move to the fall. Cyclo Zydeco being one that will happen the same week as Festival of Cayenne and Creole. I mentioned earlier the Visitor Enterprise Fund that we operate, which will be a small amount of funding for some of our festivals and attractions and museums. But Lieutenant Governor, you guys also run a few different grant programs. Have y'all had any discussions about if those might look a little different this year?
Absolutely. We're going to increase them, and we're also going to know that the marketing money is going to be limited both with what you're able to do and with those events. So that's where we're really going to try to help through social media and advertisement to really make sure all those events reach out to many more people. So as we see those things, bookings, our marketing team is going to make sure we market them to the right people to make sure they're well attended. And we're going to be willing and ready to do that, depending on what it takes per event, to make sure we reach enough people and make them successful.
Thank you. David asked, what about museums and dance halls? Will we be able to open as well? And if so, do you think there will be a 6-foot rule by example? It's hard to two-step 6 feet apart. Yeah.
That's a great question. I just wrote that down for the committee. Obviously, in phase 1, the 6-foot rule is still in place. Whether you can just that's a tough one. Whether they open back up in phase 1, but don't allow close dancing, that's going to be something to be discussed. Just wrote that question down. One I hadn't gotten before.
That's a good question. Glad we can give you a new one. And then along those lines, you were talking about the different phases. Lieutenant Governor, have you heard if phase 3 includes sporting events as well, like college football and baseball? Has there been any conversation on that?
You know, the phase 3 is opening back up. They didn't specifically list college or sporting events in it, but it does allow for fairs, festivals, concerts, and things like that. But I'm sure everybody's waiting for the college and the pro football to come out with what their plan is. And I suspect they're going to wait as long as possible as well, because I don't think either one of them wants to have football games without stands, people in the stands.
Right. Another question from Maggie. What do you think will be the long-term changes in the hospitality industry after the pandemic, i.e. more pedestrian-friendly planning, revenue-generating, virtual events, etc.? And I'll just say I think all the above. It will be a little bit different, and certainly we're having those conversations internally. I do believe there's been some talk now that everybody is meeting virtually, or like we are on Zoom. What effect will that have on the meeting industry? I think there may be early on, but I still do believe that the meetings industry will bounce back. Lieutenant Governor, any thoughts on that, or Jimmy, from what you guys are hearing?
Well, I mean, I'll go. I mean, we do expect some type of change from, a virtual meeting, but I mean, we're hoping that's a short term, at least, until the fear of this has subsided, whether that be the fall or next spring. We expect to have more of that. We've reduced our forecast for a full year impact. Although that ramps up slightly, it's still probably half of what we had expected going into this. I do want to say there's a question about the wedding industry, and I don't know if we skipped it or we're getting to it, but I just wanted to answer that if you have a wedding scheduled for May, we don't see many of those remaining, and we are hearing that, you know, the churches, their schedules are filling up quick for late summer, early fall, and then reception venues as well, that due to the postponements, there's, you know, our itineraries are filling up fast. So if you're on the fence about that, you might should go ahead and pull that trigger.
Yes, and I think, you know, as we do start to reschedule events, at some point you're going to run out of dates. Obviously, the wedding industry is a good example of that, and other venues across the state which are harder to get into already, like the Memorial Center in New Orleans, and so that's another point we haven't really talked about. But at some point you're going to run out of different dates available, and so you'll have to, instead of pushing it back to the fall, you'll have to push it back to the spring. What about, see, a question from Cindy, what about festival type situations where they are outside? And I think those certainly have a better chance of probably allowing a comfort level for the public. And I want to go back to one of the questions earlier. I think, you know, everybody's going to be in the same position from a financial standpoint. Whether you're a nonprofit, a festival, it's going to be very hard to raise money, which is why we're trying to open up our grant program for other things outside of infrastructure and marketing. So I think that's going to be a challenge for everybody, raising money to try to put on not only different festivals and events, but also nonprofits and all the different scenarios that we're experiencing, homelessness and all those other scenarios that come along with the COVID-19. Lieutenant Governor, a question from Fran. Do state parks plan to offer discounts when they are open?
Yeah, we're working on all kind of promotional, because we know the people, when we shut them down, about 65% of the people were staying in there were from out of town. And what we want to make sure is, as they're planning their next trip, that they're looking. So we're looking at offering a day before. If you book a cabin for 3 nights, you get a day before and a day after. So you get an extra 2 nights to keep them in that community spending money. We're looking at a giveaway. So we're looking at all kind of promotions when this is open back up to really reach out to all those people. The good news is we've got all the contacts of everyone that ever stayed at a state park, so we can reach out and touch them pretty quickly. We're also going to use that data when you have an event in your region to reach out and use that to reach all those people that's ever stayed in your region, to let them know what's going on in your region. Something we've never done before.
Thank you. We had a question from Karen regarding Noel Acadian in December. Should we move it? Does the Lieutenant Governor see further restrictions impacting large outdoor events? I just want to say, I think personally it's a little too early to make that decision, Karen. We need to see what the landscape looks like in the next couple of months. And Lieutenant Governor has mentioned that previously as well, is what he's trying to, the message he's trying to get across is let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Anything else you want to add on that, Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah, I would, you know what is people are calling me saying, I've got this event scheduled in July, do I cancel? What I tell them is, wait, mark that date on your calendar when it's going to cost you money not to cancel, whether that's putting deposits, whether it's, or, you know, where it's going to start costing you additional money. And that's the date we need to talk and make that decision. How close are we to phase 2 or 3 that would allow that event to happen? And I think, you know, every day things are changing. I think next week, early next week, we'll have a good idea if this May 1st is going to look. And then by the end of that week, looking at when we set that date for phase 1, then we'll start being able to say, okay, it looks like we could get to phase 2 and phase 3 in 30, 45 days and see those events after that not cancel. So, you know, that's kind of how we're going to have to work this.
Rob hears that Cardinal Capital has seen success finding money for the hospitality industry. I don't know if Rob works for the Cardinal Capital, but if so, you might want to get with Rob on the hospitality industry. But seriously, I have heard of some different capital companies across the state who are who are raising money specifically for the hospitality industry. And I think some of that will be coming out in the future through the Louisiana Travel Association and others. In phase 3, where we hope to see outdoor concerts, do we anticipate reduced occupancy numbers, which could be difficult to enforce for free public events in public spaces? That's a great point. Many of our events are free and outside. Lieutenant Governor, that might be something that the committee, Resilience Committee, can look at for phase 3. But I don't think we've heard any concrete answers on that at this time.
You know, the discussions for concerts and things like there's been discussions, everything from every 5th seat being filled. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean I get to go to every 5th Saints game? And the guy next to me goes, you know, or Tiger Stadium, do I get to pick which game I get to go to? I don't know if that's really doable, but that's been discussed. So we're just going to have to see as we get through this. I'm hoping that this thing ramps down pretty quickly, and we can see normal large events by the end of the summer.
And we're reaching about the end of our time, so I don't know if you want to take one last question or ask for closing thoughts.
I think I'm looking at. I think I've tried my best to get to most of the questions, and Lieutenant Governor, we'll give each panelist opportunity for any closing thoughts you might have, starting with you.
Yeah, thank y'all for participating, and please reach out to me. And then anything we can do to help, we're going to be there. You know, we had the anniversary of the oil spill yesterday, and you know we didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel when that thing came ashore. Yet we came out of that, and if any state can bounce back, Louisiana can. So through these difficult times, anything I can do to help, but we'll get through it. And if any state can come out of this better, Louisiana will, because that's what we do. We help our neighbors and we support our local businesses. So I look forward to working with all of you, and please call on me if I can help you with anything.
Thank you for your leadership. And as I mentioned earlier, we feel very grateful to have you in this position, leading our state through yet another crisis. So thank you. I know your schedule is very, very full. We appreciate you joining us. Randy, any closing thoughts?
We just look forward to getting the restaurant industry back up and running. We look forward to clear direction from the state on exactly how we're going to do that and the time frame we can do it. We know those answers can't be answered right now. We too thank the Lieutenant Governor for taking the time to speak with us, and everybody that's helped this industry, and of course support local, but support all restaurants if you can.
Thank you, Jimmy. Closing thoughts?
Yep. Just, you know, we're all in it together. We rely on the restaurants and the attractions to fill the hotel room. So, you know, we obviously see now you can't have one without the others, and we hope they open up, you know, at 100% capacity soon. And these staycation options are a fabulous way to start. So, any way we can push it.
Thank you, Jimmy. I think now that if there was anyone who didn't understand the importance of the tourism industry previously, prior to COVID-19, it's becoming more and more prevalent, and we've done our best to try to advocate for the industry prior. But I think you have a lot of people finally understanding the importance of the industry, and I want to thank all of you for joining the call, and all of you for what you're doing in the community. And thanks, One Acadiana, for giving us this opportunity to talk about the tourism industry. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. And thank you to Lieutenant Governor Nunga, Sir Randy Daniel, Jimmy Thaxton, and thanks to all of our participants for joining us. We will be sharing the video recording and other materials from today's presentation within the next 24 hours. We're going to email them to all the participants, and they'll be posted on One Acadiana's website. We hope that the webinar was helpful today, and we look forward to offering more webinars in the future. Stay tuned for follow-up emails from us and our partners. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you all again, and please stay safe.
Thank you.